General Grant was nominated as the Republican candidate for the presidency in 1868 and defeated his competitor Horatio Seymour on a platform of just having peace. Much corruption occurred in this era, such as the credit mobilier scandal in 1872, when the construction company hired themselves at inflated prices to build the railroad line. The Panic of 1873 emerged shortly after Grant's re-election, caused mainly by over-speculation and excessive expansion. Inflation lowered the value of the greenback, and the Resumption Act of 1875 was passed in order to redeem all paper currency in gold at face value. Republican candidate Rutherford B. Hayes won the election of 1876, and the Compromise of 1877 was passed the year he began his presidency, ending the Reconstruction in the South. However, white Democrats resumed their political power in the South and exercised discrimination against blacks. Finally, the state-level codes of segregation known as the Jim Crow laws were enacted. James A. Garfield won the election of 1880, but was shot and killed in 1881, making his vice president, Chester E. Arthur, succeed the presidency. Garfield's death led politicians to reform the spoils system. Grover Cleveland, a Democrat, won the election of 1884, but soon lost support after lowering the tariff. Thus, Republican Benjamin Harrison won the election of 1888. A $1 billion Congress emerged, giving pensions to Civil War veterans, increasing government purchases on silver, and passing the McKinley Tariff Act of 1890. The Populist Party was formed from frustrated farmers in the West and South who demanded inflation through free and unlimited coinage of silver, a graduated income tax, and immigration restriction. However, the party failed to win a presidential election. The Panic of 1893, caused by overbuilding, overspeculation, and labor disorders, was the worst economic downturn in the 19th century. President Cleveland repealed the Sherman Silver Purchase Act of 1890 and turned to J.P. Morgan to lend $65 million in gold to increase the Treasury's reserve. Funded by government subsidies and loans, the first transcontinental rail line was completed in 1869, soon followed by others. This rail network opened vast new markets and prompted industrial growth. The power and corruption of the railroads led to public demands for regulation, which was only minimally begun. New technology and forms of business organization led to the growth of huge corporate trusts. Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller led the way in the steel and oil industries. Initially, the oil industry supplied kerosene for lamps, but it eventually expanded by providing gasoline to fuel automobiles. Cheap steel transformed industries from construction to rail building, and the powerful railroads dominated the economy and reshaped American society. The benefits of industrialization were unevenly distributed. The South remained an underdeveloped dependence, while the industrial working class struggled at the bottom of the growing class divisions of American society. Increasingly transformed from independent producers and farmers to dependent wage earners, American workers became vulnerable to illness, industrial accidents, and unemployment. Workers' attempts at labor organization were generally ineffective. The Knights of Labor disappeared after the Haymarket bombing. Gompers founded the American Federation of Labor to organize skilled craft laborers, but ignored most industrial workers, women, and blacks. The United States moved from the country to the city in the post-Civil War decades. Mushrooming urban development was exciting but also created severe social problems, including overcrowding and slums. After the 1880s, the cities were flooded with new immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe. With their strange customs and non-Protestant religions, the newcomers were sometimes met with nativist hostility and discrimination. Religion had to adjust to social and cultural changes. Roman Catholicism and Judaism gained strength, while conflicts over evolution and biblical interpretation divided Protestant churches. American education expanded rapidly, especially at the secondary and graduate levels. Blacks and immigrants tried, with limited success, to use education as a path to upward mobility. Significant conflicts over moral values, especially relating to sexuality and the role of women, began to appear. The new urban environment provided expanded opportunities for women, but also created difficulties for the family. Families grew more isolated from society, the divorce rate rose, and the average family size shrank. American literature and art reflected a new realism, while popular amusement became a big business. At the close of the Civil War, the Great Plains and Mountain West were still occupied by Indians who hunted buffalo on horseback and fiercely resisted white encroachment on their land and way of life. But the whites' railroads, mining, and livestock broke up Indian territory, while diseases undercut their strength and numbers. A cycle of environmental destruction and intertribal warfare eventually overcame Indian resistance and soon threatened Native Americans' very existence. The federal government combined a misconceived treaty program with intermittent warfare to force the Indians onto largely barren reservations. Attempting to coerce Indians into adopting white ways, the government passed the Dawes Act, which eliminated tribal ownership of land, while often insensitive humanitarians created a network of Indian boarding schools that further assaulted traditional culture. The mining and cattle frontiers created colorful chapters in Western history. Farmers carried out the final phase of settlement, lured by free homesteads, railroads, and irrigation. The census declared the end of the frontier in 1890, concluding a formative phase of American history. The frontier was less of a safety valve than many believed, but the growth of cities actually made the West the most urbanized region of the United States by the 1890s. Beginning in the 1870s, farmers began pushing into the treeless prairies beyond the 100th meridian, using techniques of dry farming that gradually contributed to soil loss. Irrigation projects, later financed by the federal government, allowed specialized farming in many areas of the arid West, including California. The closing of the frontier in 1890 signified the end of traditional westward expansion, but the Great West remained a unique social and environmental region. As the farmers opened vast new lands, agriculture was becoming a mechanized business dependent on specialized production in international markets. Once declining prices and other woes doomed the farmers to permanent debt and dependency, they began to protest their lot, first through the Grange and then through the Farmers' Alliance, the prelude to the People's or Populist Party. The major depression of the 1890s accelerated farmer and labor strikes and unrest, leading to a growing sense of class conflict. In 1896, pro-slaveryite William Jennings Bryan captured the Democratic Party's nomination and led a fervent campaign against the Goldbug Republicans and their candidate William McKinley. McKinley's success in winning urban workers away from Bryan proved a turning point in American politics, signaling the triumph of the city, the middle class, and a new party system that turned away from monetary issues and put the Republicans in the political driver's seat for 2 generations. These developments provoked the United States to turn its attention overseas in the 1890s. The desire for new imperialism was mainly caused by the desire for new economic markets, the melodramatic appeals of the yellow press, missionary fervor, Darwinist ideology, and naval competition. Strong American intervention in the Venezuelan boundary dispute of 1895 to 1896 demonstrated an aggressive new assertion of the Monroe Doctrine and led to a new British willingness to accept American dominance in the Western Hemisphere. American involvement in Hawaii climaxed in 1893 in a revolution against native rule by white American planters. President Cleveland initially refused to annex the islands, but the question of incorporating the Hawaii into the United States resulted in the first full-fledged imperialistic debate in American history. The Spanish-American War began in 1898 over American outrage about Spanish oppression of Cuba. American support for the Cuban Rebellion had popularly increased by the yellow press. After the mysterious Maine explosion in February of 1898, this public passion pushed President McKinley into war. An astounding first development of the war was Admiral Dewey's naval victory in May 1898 in the rich Spanish islands of the Philippines in East Asia. Then in August, American troops, assisted by Filipino rebels, captured the Philippine city of Manila in another dramatic victory. Despite mass confusion, American forces also easily overwhelmed the Spanish in Cuba and Puerto Rico. After a long and bitter national debate over the wisdom and justice of American imperialism, which ended in a narrow pro-imperialist victory in the Senate, the United States took over the Philippines and Puerto Rico as colonial possessions. Regardless of serious doubts about imperialism, the United States has strongly asserted itself as a proud new international power. America's decision to take the Philippines aroused violent resistance from the Filipinos, who had expected independence. The brutal war that ensued was longer and costlier than the Spanish-American War. Imperialistic competition in China deepened American involvement in Asia. Hay's open-door policy helped prevent the great powers from dismembering China. The United States joined an international expedition to suppress the Boxer Rebellion. Theodore Roosevelt brought a new energy and assertiveness to American foreign policy. When his plans to build a canal in Panama were frustrated by the Colombian Senate, he helped promote a Panamanian independence movement that enabled the canal to be built. He also altered the Monroe Doctrine by adding a Roosevelt corollary that declared an American right to intervene in South America. Roosevelt negotiated an end to the Russo-Japanese War, but angered both parties in the process. Several incidents showed that the United States and Japan were now competitors in East Asia.